Go into the world and tell every man that you meet, there is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take. What you need to know right now. A bold synthesis of inspiration and information. Keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McLean starts now.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. It's great to be on with you. Praise be to God. From the hot seat in Buffalo, New York, from the Station of the Cross Catholic Media studios here in Buffalo. I am sitting in fact, I have ousted Trad Jack Burton from his throne and his wall of screens. I'm sitting in his seat. He's in a different studio this morning, and it's going to be a great show. In fact, we're going to have Dr. Anthony Stine on the program. He was supposed to be on, what day was that? Wednesday, but we had technical problems. We're going to get him on today. We're going to be talking about a couple of things. One is the Shroud of Turin. It's probably old hat news to you, but I was traveling the last few days, and I've missed so much, and I want to get caught up. Apparently, there's new evidence out about the authenticity of the dating going back to the 1st century for the Shroud of Turin. Kind of cool. Dr. Stine will be on the program to talk about that. And then we're going to have the Catholic Land Movement on the team at 30 past the hour. You know, I drove through some of the most beautiful country in the United States. It was so incredible. Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky, Ohio, Pennsylvania, into Western New York. Such an epic drive, such a beautiful part of the world. And it really does make me long for a simpler, quieter, peaceful life, the agrarian life. We're going to have that conversation with Jay Leccese coming up at 30 past the hour. So lots of stories in the news we're going to be covering for you today. We'll put them in the show notes over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. You can find all the show notes there at the top of the hour. Plus, we should have an after show live from the Buffalo studios because tomorrow is our big 25-year anniversary conference. I'm giving the first talk of the day. I can't wait. It's going to be great. I'm going to be telling the story of Joey Ox. It's the radical choice, the story of saints and sinners. And boy, I've never told the story of Joey Ox before, so I'm looking forward to that. That's tomorrow morning at the Niagara Falls Convention Center. Bishop Strickland's going to be there, Father Mateg, Mother Miriam, Candace Owens, and even Jim Havens from The Simple Truth. It's going to be a full house. We're looking forward to it. So if you're heading this way, make sure to stop by and say hello. But let's get started. Let's pray. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come. Before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and now your saint of the day.
Saint Philip Benizi, pray for us. The first Servite saint, Philip was born to the noble Benizi family in Florence on the Feast of the Assumption in the year of our Lord 1233. He became a medical doctor at just 19 years of age, but soon left this career, called by a vision of Our Lady to join the Order of Servants of Mary, or Servites, who were founded on the very day of his own birth. He attempted to remain a simple lay brother, but because of his excellent education, he was prevailed upon to become a priest. Despite his great reluctance, he was elected General Superior of the Order in 1267. Philip steadfastly defended the Servites in the face of restrictions on mendicant friars after the Second Council of Lyon, though he did not live to see the order's final formal approval. He also helped St. Juliana Falconieri begin the Third Order of Servites, or Mantellate Sisters, and brought about the conversion of St. Peregrine. Philip was known for his diplomatic skills and the working of many miracles. At one point he was highly regarded as a papal candidate, but he fled to the mountains and hid until Pope St. Gregory X was elected instead. He died at the age of 52 on August 22nd, the octave day of the Assumption, in the year of our Lord 1285. For more about this day and others in the Church's calendar, visit thestationofthecross.com/saints and seasons. Saint Philip Benizi, pray for us.
And now your headline news. Just the News reports union contract dispute grinds Canadian railroads to a halt, threatens the key U.S. supply chain. Canadian railroads locked out their employees after the deadline for a new contract agreement with the Teamsters Canadian Rail Conference Union passed at noon yesterday. Canadian government officials are now holding an urgent meeting to discuss the shutdown. The contract negotiations are slated to resume, but in the meantime, all rail traffic in Canada and all shipments crossing the U.S. border have stopped. The U.S. Department of Transportation reports that the trade by rail between Canada and the U.S. each month amounts to billions of dollars. The Hill reports Supreme Court partially reinstates Arizona voting law at RNC's request. The U.S. Supreme Court yesterday partially agreed to the Republican National Committee's request to revive an Arizona law that strengthens proof of citizenship requirements for voting. In a 5-4 vote, the justices reinstated a provision that mandates officials reject state voter registration forms if the person did not provide proof of citizenship. But a majority declined the RNC's demand to also put into effect Arizona's separate prohibition on someone voting for president or by mail without citizenship proof, even if they applied using a federal version of the registration form. And Catholic Vote is reporting Harris accepts nomination. Vice President Kamala Harris accepted the 2024 Democratic presidential nomination on Thursday night. Quote, "I see a nation that is ready to move forward," she said, going on to say, quote, "America, let us show each other and the world who we are and what we stand for," close quote. I think that is the $64,000 question, don't you? What exactly does she stand for? We still don't really know. And those are your headline news. Hey, the gospel today comes to us from Matthew chapter 22, verses 34 through 40. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a scholar of the law, tested him by asking, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" He said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments." The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Origen said Jesus had put the Sadducees to silence to show that the tongue of falsehood is silenced by the brightness of truth. For as it belongs to the righteousness, man to be silent when it is good to be silent, and to speak when it is good to speak, and not to hold his peace, so it belongs to every teacher So it belongs to every teacher of there's a problem with the translation. A teacher of the not need to be silent, of the need to not be silent, but to be silent as far as good purpose is concerned. So I guess the bottom line Origen is trying to say, even though there's a typo in that, is that you need to know when to hold. It's like what is that? The Kenny Loggins song? Know when to hold them. Know when to fold them. It's like that. That's like essentially what Origen is trying to say. He only said it, 1,500 years before Kenny Rogers did. You got to know when to talk and when not to talk. Father McKeevely said this. The question next is what these words mean. They certainly cannot refer to our actually and constantly loving God with all the energies of our soul, so that we should be constantly engaged in acts of love, that we should love nothing but him and love him as much as he deserves to be loved. In this sense, the precept can only be fulfilled in the life to come. In this sense, we can only hope to arrive at the love of God as the term of our fruition in heaven. In this sense, it might be suited to the angels, but it would be impossible for us poor, weak mortals here on earth. It is in this sense that St. Augustine, speaking in certain portions of his works, both of this precept of loving God and of the precept, thou shalt not covet, says they are not accomplished in this life, but only to be fulfilled in the life to come. What are they talking about? The constant need to give God praise, to keep God always on the tip of your tongue, which reminds me of the Eastern Orthodox and how they have the discipline and the practice to constantly be praising. This is what St. Paul called us to always be praising God. So, I mean, do we spend our day giving God praise throughout our day? Maybe it's small things, the little stuff. Maybe every once in a while we should just say, God be praised, or God be with us, or some mention to keep it on the top of our mind that God is here. He is everywhere. He is with us all day. It's not as though we are separated from him at any given time. It might do us some good to remind ourselves of God's holy presence, that we might check our disordered passions that we are so given to all the time. Father McKeebley goes on, the most probable meaning of them then is that our love of God should be comparatively supreme, that we should be so habitually disposed that we should bestow our love on no object opposed to God, that we would share his love with no other being, but love everyone else for him, that we should love him not merely with our lips, but with our hearts, unlike those who loved him with their mouth, but their heart was far from him. You can proclaim all you wish with your tongue, with your mouth, but your heart, God sees your heart. He knows where you are. He knows what you're thinking. He knows what you're doing. Give it all over to him. That's the lesson here. Know when to talk, know when to be silent, but always give God praise. Hey, coming up after the break, we're going to have Dr. Anthony Stine from Return to Tradition on. Let's talk about the Shroud of Turin and new evidence. All that and more is coming up next. We'll be right back.
The Station of the Cross has many ways to keep you informed about our programming. You can view the highlights of our primetime programming schedule or the full 24/7 programming grid at both thestationofthecross.com or the free iCatholic Radio app. Just search under the Programming tab. Our website also offers a printable version for your convenience.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. It's good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Hey, coming up at 30 past the hour, we're going to have a conversation with Jay Leccese from the Catholic Land Movement. There is a whole community, there's a whole effort, a movement to get back to the agrarian lifestyle, to something simpler, to flee from the cities and the suburban culture and to find something that is wholesome and good in God's creation. And we're going to be talking about that at 30 past the hour with Jay Leccese. So do join us for that. But there is apparently I've been on the road for 3 days, so I've missed so much. And apparently there is new evidence out to suggest the Shroud of Turin may be legit from the first century. Like, duh, like I knew this. You probably knew this. But I guess the world needs to hear this now more than ever. And I saw that Dr. Anthony Stine from Return to Tradition put out a video on this very subject. And I thought it'd be great to jump into this topic and have a conversation. He joins us now. Dr. Stine, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, and thanks for having me back on again.
Praise be to God. I'm sorry it didn't work out the other day. The tech issues. I promised to have my producer beaten and flogged publicly when we get off the air today. But I'm glad you're here. I'm teasing. I would never do that. He's invaluable. Good to be back on with you, Dr. Stine. I have missed so much, and you've covered so much. Originally I wanted to talk about sort of like one of the canary in the coal mine about the situation of the church these days. But then I saw this story break about the Shroud of Turin. I saw a lot of people talking about it. So what is the story here?
Well, the Shroud of Turin has been investigated several times by scientists using carbon-14 dating. And anybody knows anything about carbon-14 dating, it's kind of, imagine if you put a timeline on a wall and you took a shotgun and you shot it at like roughly where you think it is on a timeline. Right. That's kind of what carbon-14 dating is. You don't exactly get an accurate timeline. It's why scientific studies went about like the age of dinosaurs or whatever are always like, well, they lived from between this 100 million year period to this 100 million
right.
period.
Give or take a billion. Nothing,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. It gives you literally no information.
You know, the other thing.
So they kept.
The other thing that gets me about the carbon-14 dating thing real quick is there's an assumption here. They'll say, well, the decay of the carbon is consistent throughout time. Really? Would it be consistent if an asteroid came from some other part of the universe and destroyed, all of the dinosaurs? Like, would it, and blacked out the Earth, would the carbon-14 decay be the same then too? Like, it just seems strange, like they want their cake and eat it too.
I would just assume that changing atmospheric conditions would, ice ages and periods of warming and things would be enough to change the way, through just chemistry, would be enough to change the way that those things decay. But they applied this to the Shroud of Turin in the 80s and said, it came from the Middle Ages. The methodology they use has been roundly criticized by anybody with any shred of scientific background because it was sloppy. So fast forward, and in Italy, in the last couple of years, they've been re-examining the Shroud of Turin using a different method of researching it, which is looking at the decay rate of the flax that was used to make the shroud. And the parts of the shroud that are not the patchwork done on it in the Middle Ages, because it then caught fire at one point and had been handled with bare hands by bishops for centuries. And so parts where they handled it were decaying. So they patched it in the Middle Ages. But the parts that weren't were dated to have been from the 1st century. And it matches a piece of cloth that they know existed in the year 72 AD. In terms of, I don't mean match like came from the same cloth, but matches in terms of known age, something they already know how old it is. So it is known to have come from the 1st century. What does that mean? Well, it confirms everything we've said about the shroud, except for, of course, the de facto claim of, is it actually the cloth that was used to wrap our blessed Lord after his passion? Because you can't verify that so much, although if you test the blood on it, I'm pretty sure the blood that's on there has been tested is actually blood, has been tested as somebody who went through torture, the events of the passion, because there's a chemical change in your blood when your body is stressed and when you undergo violence. It has all the hallmarks of someone who went through torture.
Yeah.
And I believe it tested to be the same blood type as Eucharistic miracles. So when you put all that together, they can't say, yes, this was a burial shroud of Jesus Christ. But they can say it does have all the evidence that it could be the shroud for Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's the most fascinating relic, I would argue, that we have in possession, because it not only has the blood that matches Eucharistic miracles, it has pollen specific to Palestine or Israel in the 1st century. Of course, now this new dating sort of seems to confirm that as well. There's no paint. There's no paint pigment anywhere on the document. There's no sketching. How artists sketch their image first and then they paint over it. There's no sketching. There's no paint. And it clearly looks as though this image is a photo negative, has 3-dimensional qualities. There's so many aspects to it that have already been intriguing. So the dating of this, I guess, just sort of seals the deal, doesn't it?
You would think so. There's a documentary filmmaker who had been an atheist who he did his own investigation into it and converted because of it. I don't know if he's a Catholic or if he's just some sort of self-described Christian, but he has put up $1 million bounty, basically saying, if you can recreate the Shroud of Turin using methods known only at that time, using only paints and other things available at that time, and make it pass an inspection, I will give you $1 million.
Wow, that's a big deal.
No one has been able to claim it. Yeah. So,
well, I mean, the photographer on the expedition that was back in the 70s, I believe, he's still a Jew today. I think I even interviewed him years ago, and he said he believes he's supposed to be a disinterested third-party witness, and he believes this is Jesus. So very, very, it's all the famous images that we have of him that's floated around the internet. He's the one who took those pictures. But speaking of pictures,
I can't understand how you can be a disinterested third party on the question of the Messiah.
Neither can I. But I think it is it's fascinating that he's still speaking out today to say he believes fully that this is Jesus who was crucified under Caiaphas and Ananias and Pontius Pilate. But speaking of images, I wanted to get your take on this AI image of Jesus that's based off the Shroud of Turin that's floating around. How do you feel about artificial intelligence generated images, especially of our Lord, Our Lady, things like that?
I do not like artificial intelligence used for making sacred art. The creation of sacred art is itself an act of like self-giving, because the time used in it and just the nature of the expression of the soul in the creation of actual artwork, even bad artwork. And AI is lifeless. I'm not on team demonic when it comes to AI critiques. I'm not there. It's just a tool, as its uses can easily be misused. Maybe that is what our Lord looked like according to the Shroud, according to AI. I don't know. I just don't like it in general. I refrained from even reporting on it in my own report on the Shroud. I thought about doing that, but I already know my comments have been filled with people being angry at me for showing AI.
Half the audience is going to be, or maybe even more, 75% might be like, AI is always bad. It's just evil. It's wrong. I'm sure producer Jake's in the next room probably thinking that right now. So, I mean, I get that, especially of holy images of our Lord and Our Lady in particular. I think we have to be slightly careful of. But at the same time, like you say, it's just a tool. I think it depends on how it's programmed. So a tool in the hands of a good person is going to be fine, but the tool in the hands of the global elitist, well, I think we can expect bad things. I think isn't that fair to say?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like the easiest one example of this is a gun as a tool in the hand of a good police officer. It's used for good, or in the hands of someone who's defending their home, it's generally used for good. But in the hands of a criminal, it becomes or someone incompetent, it becomes an extraordinarily dangerous tool. And it's worth reminding ourselves that AI is at least right now, its application is at least in part a communications tool. And what are communications tools used for every time a new communications tool is developed? What is the first thing people do with it? Do you know what it is?
What?
Pornography.
Yeah.
Every single time.
Oh, man. Burn it.
Every single time.
Burn it to the ground.
This is no different. This is no different. Social media, what platforms were making policy rules about, fake images of celebrities used for this stuff and all kinds of other evil things, because it's the first tool. So I'm a little, I understand why people would call it demonic because of what it was used for initially. And then, of course, all the images of human beings it would generate always had like an extra toe. Yeah. Eyes that were different color, weird stuff.
Yeah. Kind of like all those AI generated crowds for the Kamala Harris events. They were just weird conglomerations of mashed up people. It was just odd to say the least. But I guess if you can't get big audiences, I suppose AI is your friend. Hey, Laura says the AI is the Antichrist. Well, she may be right. I don't know. And then I think
pretty sure the Antichrist is a man, according to the church teachings. It's actual human being.
It's the Matrix. Who was it? Someone said it looked like Matthew McConaughey in the chat. We'll probably continue. Oh yeah, Mary G did. Good morning to you, Mary. Good morning to you, Laura. Thanks for hanging out in the chats with us. We'll probably, I don't know if you can come back, Dr. Stine, to chat it up in the after show. That would be great today if you could. But I wonder, one last question going back to the Shroud and the news story. I think it is good news. It's good news indeed that there is further evidence to suggest. I think it gets more intriguing and more amazing the more we study it, to be sure. But at the end of the day, didn't Jesus say, even if Lazarus were to come back from the dead, they still wouldn't believe? It seems like no matter how much evidence is given, people have just chosen to reject God. I don't know that it's really going to convince all that many people. I mean, some for sure, but what do you say?
I framed my discussion in it. I opened by talking about what signs and wonders are. And I don't often quote the New Catechism, but I quoted the New Catechism because it has a succinct explanation for signs and wonders, miracles, what their purpose is. And it explicitly says in the Catechism that people will still reject miracles, even though miracles are usually aimed at non-believers to make them, to help them believe, because the believer doesn't need miracles. Those who have faith don't need to chase after Eucharistic miracles and the other miracles, because we already believe, even though it's nice when we see them, nice to see the sign from God, but it's there for those who are weak or lacking in faith. Yeah. And as you say, there are many people, it reminds me of the old adage about atheists. It's not so much that atheists don't believe in God, it's that they hate him. That's why so many atheists know scripture better than a lot of Christians do.
Wow. Stanley says the photographer was Barry Schwartz and he recently died. I didn't hear that, Stanley. So thanks for letting me know. We'll have to pray for the repose of his soul. He says his mother also believed in the Shroud. So I pray that many people will come to believe because of the Shroud of Turin and give their hearts and their minds and their whole bodies and selves to the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, because he is the only way, the truth, and the life to the Lord, to God, and for all eternity. So we'll have to keep them in our prayers for sure. Have you ever been on pilgrimage to Italy? Have you ever been to Turin, Dr. Stine?
I've never traveled out over to Europe in general. I'd love to, but it's just too many small children, not enough money. You know how it goes.
I do. Well, you have to lead a pilgrimage.
And I think too many children in terms of too many children in terms of my pocketbook for traveling, not too many children because they're all getting.
I knew what you meant. Dr. Stine.
Well, there are people who will take anything out of context. So.
Well, we'd like to have you back in the after show if you could. We'll continue our conversation to get the audience to chime in on their feelings of AI, the use of AI for holy images. I have been guilty of sharing a few, one or two here or there. So it'd be interesting to get the audience's take on that. So we'll see you there if you can. But speaking of pilgrimages, I'm going to be going on a pilgrimage next May with Bishop Strickland. We're going to go to Greece, and we're going to go to Patmos, and we're going to go to Ephesus, and we're even, I think, extending it to Rome, too. So more details on that coming up in the next few weeks, I would say. But we're going to go to a break. We're going to come right back. Let's talk about the Catholic land movement. Should we make a mass exodus of suburbia back to the land? That's coming up next. Don't go anywhere. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain, and here are your headline news. The Blaze reports U.S. government admits elevated fluoride levels consistently associated with lower IQ in children. After evaluating numerous epidemiological studies where some pregnant women, babies, and children were exposed to fluoride at levels exceeding 1.5 milligrams per liter of drinking water, the National Toxicology Program, part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, concluded there is moderate confidence in the scientific evidence that showed an association between higher levels of fluoride and lower IQ in children. While the World Health Organization guidelines recommends 1.5 milligrams per liter as safe limit for fluoride, the HHS alternatively recommends 0.7 milligrams per liter. Prior to 2015, it was 1.2. I guess this explains a lot about my upbringing. Anyway, Breitbart reports Greek oil tanker drifting and ablaze after Red Sea attacks. A Greek-flagged oil tanker traveling through the Red Sea came under repeated attack Wednesday, leaving the vessel not under command and drifting ablaze after an assault suspected to have been carried out by Yemen's Houthi rebels, the British military reported. The attack, the most serious in the Red Sea in weeks, comes during a months-long campaign that has disrupted trade routes through which $1 trillion in cargo passes each year. And Catholic Vote is reporting anti-Christian attacks on the rise worldwide. The Catholic Herald published an article on the growing phenomenon of Christian phobia manifesting on a global scale. The article highlights attacks on Catholic churches in the French territory of New Caledonia in the South Pacific. Just this summer, 4 Catholic churches in New Caledonia have been set on fire. 52% of the territory's population is baptized, and still they're burning their churches. Check out France. Check out Canada. Check out Pakistan and Nigeria. It is on the rise in China and everywhere else. Let's pray for the martyrs. And those are your headline news. Jay Leccese is joining us now from the Catholic Land Movement. CatholicLandMovement.info is their website. You know, I had a great opportunity. Good morning to you, Jay. Thanks for being on the team today. I had a great opportunity driving through some of the most beautiful countryside in America the last 3 days. Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and then into Western New York. Just such beautiful countryside. It's easy to see how the agrarian life is romantic and really just desirable as compared to the urban sprawl of some of the cities that I had to drive through as well, like Nashville. What Nashville? Oh, my heavens. Such a quaint little town, but man, the traffic is horrible there. Cincinnati, I know I'm not a big fan of your traffic. Thank you, but no thank you. Jay, let me ask you a question. What is the biggest draw? Why are some Catholics today desiring to leave suburbia and go back to the land which requires a lot of effort, a lot of work, and a lot of resources. What say you?
Yes, Joe, it certainly does require a lot of effort and work. I think, in my experience, the biggest draw that people have is they have this deep sense that something is awry in modern society. And I think that instinct is honing in on something true, which is that we are created for God's natural order. And he had a certain set of conditions in mind. Just reading the Genesis account, the first instruction to Adam, even before the fall, was to tend the garden. And there is something profoundly central to human nature in the idea of being a steward and exercising just dominion over the created order and participation with it. And, with the advent of the Industrial Revolution in modern society and this increasingly technologically advanced and dystopian world, people feel very, very distanced from that closeness to the soil that I think is part of human nature. And I think that is something that is drawing people back in various streams to a closeness to the earth.
It's interesting because as I grow more traditional in my Catholic faith, there's this journey to try to figure out and discover, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean to be a more traditional Catholic? And, I used to think it was all about the liturgy, and it's really not. I mean, liturgy is a big component of it, to be sure, but it's that plus more. And it's the more part that I think is more mysterious to me. And what does it mean to have a traditional culture in your community? And I think the missing puzzle piece for me was the fact that, over the past 2,000 years, the connection to the land cannot be stated enough. But since we now live in suburban sprawl, we've forgotten this. Generation after generation has now forgotten what that connection is. So much of the sort of the remnants of traditions, of processions and rogation days and all these things that have come to us handed on from the past, we don't understand their full context, do we?
No, we don't. I think John Sr., who you may or may not be familiar with,
sure.
He had, just to paraphrase him, he had this idea that the modern individual, and this is particularly in the context of the education of young people, the modern youth is dehumanized to a certain extent by being divorced from the base realities of life. And he had this idea that in order to evangelize the youth of today, they first need to be humanized. And, he had a curriculum program intended to take college age students out to work in fields and to engage in cultural activities to, have a connection back to these fundamental realities of life that we're so disconnected from in the modern world.
Well, at least nowadays you can still get high-speed internet access out in the middle of nowhere, which means your kids can still play video games 24/7 while you're milking the cows. I mean, how do the kids react to this? I can understand how mom and dad, might have a desire to move back into the agrarian life, but kids tend to, if they're used to the suburban life, they might have an issue with that. What has been your experience in the movement?
Honestly, my experience has been quite surprising in a good way. My first foray into the movement was at the 2022 conference out in Voorheesville, New York, at the Shrine of the North American Martyrs. And that was really the first official kickoff of today's Catholic Land Movement, which is very much a restoration of the previous one. And one of the things that you'll notice if you go to one of these conferences is there are lots of traditional Catholics there, and they have lots of children running around constantly for a whole weekend. And, my experience was that the kids didn't seem to miss the modern world. I mean, you saw them all day long running around, playing in the fields, and also getting involved in the workshops,
Yeah.
Any of these workshops that were going on, whether it was like harvesting chickens or scything hay by hand, the kids were very interested and wanted to be involved. And maybe they recognize that. When
you hold these events, is it mostly Catholics who are thinking about the idea, or how far along the process are they? The general audience that comes to these events.
it runs the full spectrum of people who, live in an urban area and are working an office job, and they're just dipping their toes into the idea of homesteading. Maybe they started to read some of the early distributist literature or Father Vincent McNabb, and they're interested in the ideas, but really have no practical experience of these things. And it runs all the way up to people who, are generational farmers who have been doing this sort of thing their whole lives. And also all the way up to people who are scholars in distributism and the writings of the early land movement. So you have just like a full spectrum of people. And I would say most people fall somewhere in the middle.
Sure. And where do you, how much land does one need to begin homesteading and the agrarian life? 3,000 acres? I mean, you're from New Hampshire. I mean, what is it, like $2,000 an acre out there or something like that? So it must be a high barrier to entry to get back to the land, especially if you're used to living off of high debt, 2 incomes in suburbia and all the rest. How plausible is it for families to make that transition?
Yeah, well, you're definitely right in that in certain parts of the country, especially here in the Northeast, property has become more and more inaccessible to the average person for various reasons. But I would say one thing is that in order to be involved in the land movement, you don't necessarily have to have the end goal of being completely self-sufficient. We very much encourage people to start where they're at. Like if you've never grown anything before, start with some herbs in a box,
Oh, the backyard garden.
Yeah, absolutely. And really you don't need a ton of land to be very productive. I mean, you can do some amazing things on a half acre of land and just doing intensive agriculture on that. But, at the end of the day, most people aren't going to arrive at a point where they're completely self-sufficient. And I think a lot of people start with that goal and get discouraged. If you look at, the previous social order and our ancestors, these people had generations of knowledge and of tenancy on a single piece of land, and their home economy was something that was built over many generations, and there was a lot of experience that has been lost. So some people never having garden try to jump all the way into homesteading and or get failure fatigue, and that's something that I would discourage. Not to say that people can't do that and people aren't doing that, but starting small is the most important thing. And that's what the land movement is really about. It's about action. It's about doing action now. And, it's sacrificing some of the vision of like that perfect idyllic homestead for maybe just like starting with the garden box or starting with some chickens and letting it grow from there.
So what are some of the factors that you have to look for when you're trying to make decisions on leaving suburbia, going back to the land? When I look at the states, I think of things like, homeschool friendly laws and taxes and, Second Amendment rights and, all these other things. And then, of course, you have to layer on top of that. Is there a community that my family can plug into, go to mass, be around like-minded Catholics? What are some of those factors that you would say people should be considering?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I'm very much, considering now myself, and looking into making certain moves. But I would say, putting God first is important. So, finding a parish and a community that you want to be near and be a part of. And maybe you can't find the land in the immediate area, so you have to accept the fact that it's going to be a little bit of a drive. But that's like one of the centers that you have to focus your search on. And the other is like, do you have a social network there? Do you have family there? Maybe you don't. And maybe you just plan on like building those connections, but just recognize the challenge in that. But that would be like one of the other circles that I would draw on a map is like, where are my family? Where are my friends? Where's a community that I can plug into? And the third is like, where can I actually get land? And the fourth, you might prioritize these things slightly differently, but you might consider like, okay, maybe I can't leave my day job and maybe I can't work remote. So maybe I have to be in driving distance of a certain area. So you start having these like multiple overlapping Venn diagrams of where you can actually search for land. And, it's difficult. I won't underestimate that, but just approach it in prayer.
My dad was 17 when his parents bought their farm in Indiana, rural Indiana. They bought 100 acres and an old farmhouse. It was so old that the road, when the house was built, was moved many years later. So there was like an old horse cart trail in front of their house that pulled up to the porch. But the real road now is behind them. It's so fascinating. I'll never forget that farm. The big red barn, the pond, swinging on the vines in the woods, the horses and all the rest. And my dad had to learn at 17 how to fence a farm all by himself. Well, my grandfather still had to work his day job. So I guess I'm saying it's not new. It's not new. Families have been doing this for a very long time. And there is a call to leave the hustle and bustle of the ways of this world and to find something simpler and more wholesome. And this Catholic land movement seems to be representing that. I want to talk more about that with Jay Leccese from the Catholic Land Movement coming up right after this break. We'll put the show notes up for you, too. CatholicLandMovement.info is their website. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Share us with a friend.
The Station of the Cross began broadcasting in Buffalo, New York in 1999. Since then, our listening areas have multiplied and expanded into several states. While our mission is to grow the Catholic faith through radio and other media outlets, our apostolate is supportive of but independent from your local diocese. Through your generosity, we are able to inspire countless listeners with the gospel and help lead them to a parish to be spiritually nourished by the sacraments.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. It's good to be on with you. Praise be to God. I feel a little awkward, to be honest with you. I'm sitting in the studio in Buffalo, New York, and I'm not used to being in this. I'm used to my own studio back at the house in Texas. I have to switch cameras and all these things. I don't have to do anything. I just got to sit here. Like, it's weird. Having producer Jake in the next room doing all the button pushing, spinning all the plates. I may have to move to New York just so I can do this for you. I don't know. I'm thinking about it. Who knows? But then again, let's see. New York. Can you raise a family in New York with the laws the way they are here? Probably, but man, oh man, the taxes alone is a huge burden. Which reminds me, we're having a conversation with Jay Leccese from the Catholic Land Movement, CatholicLandMovement.info. Jay, welcome back to the team. And we're glad to have you on today to talk about it. I want to ask you, what do you on a scale of 1 to 10? What do you think how important is it for families to be making this kind of a choice, this kind of a lifestyle change? I look at the world and I tend to see bad things. I'm a pessimist by trade, so I tend to see the sky is falling quite a bit. But I just drove through some of the most beautiful country. I mean, the rolling hills of Kentucky. It's like being in the Shire in Lord of the Rings. It's so great. I can imagine places like that. You can never see the sky is falling. It just seems so nice and pleasant all the time. What say you? Where is the world today, and how important do you think it is for families to make this kind of a lifestyle change while they still can?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to really quantify that decision. I think the land movement, maybe it's not for everybody, or maybe it is. Maybe the principles of it are applicable to everybody's life in some degree or other, but maybe not everybody is going to make the jump to going out and moving out to a rural area and starting a homestead. But I mean, for me, that number is going to be up to like an 8, maybe. You know, I see this as a very important thing. For me personally, I feel that call to get on land and to work it and to be productive. And I think it's something that, every family, if you feel a call to this, you should look into it and investigate it. And maybe the calling is to engage with the principles of it, because if we look at the land movement, you can distill the main principles down to 4 things. One is the idea of a rural resettlement of Catholics onto productive land. The other is establishing a system of education so that people can actually learn how to be productive. The third is fellowship, which is bringing these Catholic families who are interested in homesteading together and building a network. And the fourth, which is really the most important, is the glorification of God. And to that extent, I think re-engaging with the realities of God's created order through active participation and stewardship is incredibly important and should not be dismissed, because like if you just look at the Gospels, how many agricultural parables are there, to really understand the teachings that Christ gave us. If you have a closeness to the soil, those parables are going to hit home much more. I think it's John 15. Christ says that he is the vine and that his Father is the gardener. There's something fundamental to our faith in this reality of the natural order that we should be seeking to plug ourselves into, because, going back to your original question, I think things are pretty bad right now in the world, and you don't have to be a genius to look at what's going on and say that, the writing's kind of on the wall here. We don't know how long things can go on as they are, but it seems pretty untenable.
Yeah.
So there's an instinct that a lot of people have to start looking elsewhere and to distance themselves to the society that seems to be going awry in so many ways.
Yeah.
And so I think people should listen to that.
And the food supply alone, I was reading the story this morning about the fluoride being linked to low IQ in children. I mean, we keep messing with things so badly, bad things happen. Our health is constantly just in turmoil. Could it have anything to do with the food supply? Which goes back to something I've always thought about too, is I hunt and I do our own butchering because I want my children to see the process. Meat is not served up on a styrofoam platter with cellophane on the top at a grocery store as though it never was an animal. It lived, it died, and it's providing for our family. They see the whole life and death cycle of that. That's also lost through the lack of agrarian life these days. We live in cities. We get all of our food shipped in, and that food tends to be very, very messed with from a corporate production standpoint, and our health is suffering. Just ask Big Pharma how much money they've made on that deal over the past many years. So let me ask you this: what is the biggest roadblocks to Catholics making this choice, this big lifestyle change? What are the big things that's preventing them from making the move?
Oh, that's a good question. There's so many things. Fear is one. Fear of making a change. I think it's easy the longer that you've been dug into the world and the system that we now live in to be overly attached to certain aspects of it. I think cultivating a level of detachment from some of the things that this world offers is a necessary first step to be able to make that move. And economy and work is another another major obstacle to that a lot of people have to deal with. And, it might mean embracing a certain degree of material poverty to actually put action to these principles and to go out and try and homestead. And I would say that people need to be comfortable with that to a certain degree.
Yeah. The community, I think, is also a big deal. Going out and doing this by yourself, that's hard. Going out and doing it when you're close to people you can plug into, be a part of, find support with, if nothing else, just, comfort when you need it because you're feeling defeated. That's important too, right? I mean, that's got to be a big X factor in making this decision.
Oh, certainly. People are very isolated now. Even Catholics, people involved in the land movement. One of the reasons why the land movement has kind of taken now, in these last few years is because of the internet. Ironically, we've actually been able to bring people together in a way that we couldn't before. And, people have access to workshops and conferences now, and people can engage in discussions online and then actually meet up in person. And these things all of a sudden become more accessible when you're not alone trying to figure it out yourself, but you can have a network of other Catholics who are doing the same thing. So you're definitely right about that. Not having a community is a major factor that prevents people from doing this sort of thing. And that's part of what the land movement is for.
We're down to just about a minute here with Jay Leccese from the Catholic Land Movement. Jay, so there's events. You guys are hosting like webinars or seminars or events. Are they in person and you're teaching skills for the land movement, or what goes on at these events?
Yeah, so we have multiple conferences that happen seasonally, and different Catholic land movement chapters all over the country and the world really are engaged in doing these things. And we're talking about like small workshops, from just spending an afternoon splitting wood with people to maybe discussing Father Vincent McNabb or Hilaire Bella Chesterton, or maybe we're going to do in fact, tomorrow we have a meeting to talk about raising pigs, and we're going to be harvesting chickens.
Oh, wow.
And there'll be a pig harvest later on. So,
woo, man, yummy bacon. Could you imagine how good that bacon's going to taste? Ooh, so good. So way better than the store-bought stuff, let me tell you. Jay Leccese, God bless you, my friend. Really appreciate you being on the team today and sharing the Catholic Land Movement with us. We're going to put a link to the website, catholiclandmovement.info. They have information to help you out. You can get plugged in, even with their most recent event coming up. You can register for. So check that out, catholiclandmovement.info, and share it with a friend. Jay, God bless you and God love you. I hope to see you in Nashua, September the 1st. I'll be at the High Mass of St. Stanislaus there with Father Branches. Looking forward to it. God bless you, Jay. Hey, we're going to put the show notes up, and we'll see you in the after show. And right back here on Monday morning, I'm going to give you the after action report on the 25-year conference. It's happening tomorrow. It's going to be amazing. God love you. Now, Dr. Stine, you moved from you sort of kind of did the Catholic Land Movement thing. I don't know how much land you have. I have no idea, but you moved from Portland, which is suburban dystopian Mecca, to the Oklahoma. That's kind of a big deal. So what was your biggest motivation for doing that?
Well, I was looking for work, having trouble in Portland, getting even an interview for anything. And then one day I'm sitting in my dorm room in grad school watching Alex Jones interviewing, some of Alex Jones's InfoWars people interviewing former class or student government coworkers of mine who were Antifa protesters yelling in the face of his employees.
Good times.
And his employees sounding like the rational ones.
Yikes.
At that point, I knew I needed to get out of Portland.
Yeah.
This was before the attempts to burn courthouses down, but it wasn't long before that either.
Wow.
I moved to Oklahoma in 2017.
Man, Oregon. I've never.
So that was getting out of crazy town.
Well, you did it just in time, didn't you? I mean, 2017 gave you a buffer a few years before it really got mad. It's too bad. Oregon,
I have family members trying to get me to move back to Oregon. Actually,
Oregon is such a beautiful place. It's unfortunate that
it
it's
is
run by crazy people.
lunatics.
Yeah. You get out into eastern
Which,
Oregon.
By the way, I've been told calling them crazies. I have been told is forbidden by Jesus, because apparently calling somebody crazy is calling them fool, which is weird because it's not. I literally think these people are mentally ill. Actually, they've got a mind. They're not dumb. They're their brains are rotted.
They're probably just reading the NAB version, Dr. Stine. So I mean, you can't blame them. Listen, if you're gonna read the NAB,
the Be Nice version of the Bible,
then you're probably going to come to such conclusions. Anyway, Leia's mama, good morning to you. Damon, Anna, good morning to you. Praise be to God. Thanks for being on the team today. Mike K, Jane, Paul, our friend from Buffalo. Praise be to God. Glad to see you here. Sharon's on her way up, her and her husband. We're going to see her over the weekend, as well as Paul. Looking forward to that. I see Trad Jack Burden, Tweed and Toe there, of course. I'm scrolling down. Jen, good morning to you. Praise Jesus. Glad you're here. Laura, good morning to you. Says, I do you cut men's beards on purpose, Laura? Like intentionally? I don't know. I think if a man can grow a beard, he should. That's my take on that.
I had to cut mine because mine was starting to look like a cross between two names your people in the audience will not know, but you might because we're the same age. Mine would my beard starting to look like a cross between Rob Zombie and Wayne Static's beards. And if you know who those people are, you know why I trimmed my beard down.
Didn't Rob Zombie convert though? Or maybe I misheard.
I don't know if he did or not. I know that he toned it down a lot, which just might be age. Maybe he got tired of the scary zombie shtick.
Yeah.
It was Alice Cooper. You might be thinking of Alice Cooper or
probably
Blackie Lawless. Those are the two most infamous like mainstream rock stars of the 80s.
Yeah.
Blackie Lawless was in the band Wasp, which is actually now a Christian rock band, which if you know anything about Wasp is hysterical. But the lead singer went back to his evangelical roots. And Alice Cooper one day was like, you know what? All these drugs are bad. Maybe I should go back to being a Christian again.
You think? Now that I've made all my millions, it's okay. It's nice and easy for me to do so.
Well, he still makes music and is still super popular and is still at 75 doing world tours and things.
Can you imagine?
It's just that he is just openly an evangelical Christian and openly a conservative Republican.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I know. It's weird that like a lot of the rock stars from the 80s became like Christians, and somehow I guess that because they play a style of music that's all about rebellion, their peers are like,
That's right.
Well,
what's the real rebellion now? I mean, everybody's embraced that insane life. So rebellion is to go back to your
you're
Christian
going to get like the real rebellion now would be for rock bands to come back and to make happy upbeat music like the 80s hard rock bands did, but have it not be degenerate, have it be straight edge. And when people be like, are you guys Christians? Like, yeah, you got a problem with it? You know, that would be the real rebellion.
That would
where
be.
like instead of being schlubs, like I'm wearing a polo. Some people want me to wear a suit and jacket on, but the culture is in such a place. If I did that, it would be bad. But you know, you walk around in public and everyone is dressed like they're getting ready to cut their grass.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what would be the rebellion? Put on nice clothes.
Exactly.
Put some harmony and melody.
Yesterday.
Ditch the hip hop. All of it.
We finally arrived. We arrived in Niagara Falls yesterday afternoon, early evening. And it got settled in the hotel, which was insane, chaotic. And my kids were like, "We want to go see Niagara Falls." I'm like, "Okay." So we were walking to the falls and back, and then everybody is touristy. It's place is packed, crazy. It's a madhouse, and everybody's in touristy like clothes, like so dressed down and in gym shorts or whatever. And there's one guy stood out like a sore thumb, wearing a coat and a button shirt and slacks. And he had like some sort of scholastic pin on. I thought that guy, you could see that guy from a mile. It's like the girl in the red dress in Schindler's List. It stood out like so crazy. So if you really want to be a rebel, dress up.
That's how I felt running to the grocery store yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. It was crazy.
It's just, you got to make it low, not a LARP also. Like there's that sort of a fine line of where you're going too far with it too. Like a friend of mine who's very much a hardline traditionalist, he likes to joke with me about, the sort of like overdoing it, people putting on their tweed suits, the people essentially the people who dress like Charles Coulomb, and they're young guys. Like, come on,
I think he's talking about you, Jay.
Plausible and
Probably.
not be like something where you're drawing attention to yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
See, my motto is
There's a
embrace the
fine line.
LARP.
Well, it's still before Labor Day, so you should be wearing linen suits at this point, right? Like you don't want to wear wool until after
Seersucker.
Labor Day.
I don't know if anybody knows these old rules anymore. Because
Joe, you're implying that wool is like
okay for math. If you put
thick
on
and stuffy.
like khakis and a polo.
You're implying that wool is always thick and stuffy. There's tropical weight wool.
And let me put it this way: I have been to mass at the SSPX Chapel in Oklahoma City, and I saw guys in jeans and t-shirts at mass there.
Oh yeah,
I saw
I've seen
guys
it for
in
sure.
polos there.
I've
This
seen
is
it too.
everywhere. This is across the culture. And in fact, you want to know a weird content creator story? Let me give you a weird story about this.
Okay.
Peak Obama years. Okay. Second term, peak Obama years. Right-wing media was blossoming. A lot of the right-wing commentators in the secular world got initially started and failed on YouTube. And why did they do that? Because they put on suits. They all dressed like Michael Voris at peak Michael Voris. They tried to do like Fox News, but on YouTube. And what happened? It all failed. All their channels failed.
Wow.
A couple years later, those guys were all back, dressed in polos at best, sometimes in t-shirt, making the exact same content.
Yeah.
And suddenly they have million subscriber channels.
All of a sudden.
Because people don't want formal dressing and everything. It's part of that rejection of the elites going on. Anything that looks establishment, including dressing nice, people are rejecting. And that's why I think rebelling against that disordered part of this rejection of the elites would be.
Yeah.
Imagine if you had pop singers suddenly coming out who were dressed nicely and not singing about sex all the time.
Could you imagine?
Otherwise, their music wasn't problematic, but it was fun and it was okay to listen to.
Popcorn.
And as long as it was good, and it might do well, with the caveat of knowing that the music industry since the 90s has been totally corrupted by the labels.
I would say it goes back
They
further.
have controlled everything that's been popular.
I think even further.
I would argue it goes back further. I'll never forget one of the lessons, the first lessons.
Payola was a thing in the 80s.
I was just going to bring that up because I went to radio broadcasting school in Oklahoma City. Actually, it was Del City, Oklahoma, right outside Tinker Air Force Base. I went to broadcasting school in 1996. And Jake, were you born in 96? What year were you born?
I was 1 year old in 96.
So, he was one. I got out of the Corps and I went to radio broadcasting school. And I remember the lesson on payola. And I thought, what, people, like, they want to bring me gifts and money and bribe me to play their songs? Deal. Like, that's a great deal. Like, bring it on. But they really put the hammer on payola in my generation of radio and put an end to that. So that leads us into the digital age when they went and digitized all the music. And then of course we had the whole era of file sharing that got hammered. And now we have these huge fees you have to pay in order to play any music whatsoever. We have to be very careful about the music we play. So we have to pay for a license that gives us the ability to play music, even on the internet, let alone the radio. And it's even more money.
Licensing fees for that aren't bad. It's just that I have no use for. I don't have any need to use it. But
we're a radio
licensing
network.
Fees where you have to pay a couple of bucks or $5 depending on the song. And that's not bad if you get a lot of views in your videos. But
we're a radio network, so we have to pay the licensing fees.
Oh yeah.
For our whole
every
network.
Station is going to broadcast.
And when you have a station in Boston, it's a huge station, millions of potential listeners. You're forking out some cash, and it's not inexpensive at all. But I think the whole hammering the payola led to some of this today, because back in the day, the music industry, the record labels would come show up at your door and try to bribe you to get you to play their latest hits so that people would go buy an album. They used to want people to steal that stuff. They would want you to tape deck record, the radio station and replay that in your own playlist, and so that it would help their artists get better known, more widely known. Today, it's it's almost like the reversal of that. But I would also say that there's a trend. There's a trend today that says all these music artists are putting out their content on their YouTube channels now because, it's better if 5 million people know you exist than if 10,000 people bought your album financially for their future.
And I think the future of music is going to be interesting to see where it goes. And Hollywood right now is coming to grips with the future for themselves, wondering, like, a lot of them are now about politics. Just completely. Anything that looks woke, people won't go see. That's where we are. Yeah. And that's a great place to be in the culture. Now, let's hope something disordered doesn't replace it, right? I mean, but payola is an interesting idea because YouTubers will often get offers to pitch products on their channels. Some of this stuff is funny. Like, you'll watch a video and it'll be a sponsored thing, and all of a sudden this YouTuber has nothing to do whatsoever with what they're pitching to you.
Right.
Suddenly, as trying to sell you something that you really sincerely doubt they would ever use. You want to know what the rates are for that? It's nuts. Standard YouTube rates for that. A channel of my size, I could easily ask for $5,000 for a thing. Now, every one of my videos has a thing on it, but it's not like that at all. Like, these are all mom and pop Catholic operations, with the exception of one, and I charge pennies comparatively, because I would rather you guys buy prayer cards from Pray Latin,
right?
Which is run out of literally their kitchen, which. They don't got the money to offer me hundreds of dollars for a spot. So, but I would rather y'all did that than accept, I don't know, $5,000 from what is that company? The one that sells you all the survival food. Right?
Patriot Supply.
That one.
Hey, I bought a ton of survival food many years ago. Actually, I still have it.
I have some of it too. I ain't knocking them.
Yeah.
It's just, what does it have to do with my content except maybe the prophecy stuff? Right?
If you're an outdoor channel, I could see it, right? If you're an outdoor channel, I'm like, think about.
I just think it's funny. It's like part of getting certified to be a right-wing content creator is to either A, pitch my Patriot Supply, or B, pitch gold.
Yeah.
Or C, both.
I've had people ask me. I've had some emails come in and say, "Hey, will you pitch gold or whatever?" We haven't bid on any of that. Some water companies have reached out to me to say, "Hey, would you want to do a sponsorship with water?" A couple of water companies, but we are going to roll out a sponsorship. I think this next week. iCatholic Mobile is a brand new company ran by a fantastic trad guy. He's going to be at our conference this weekend too. I'm so excited to see him and meet him in person. iCatholic Mobile, brand new company. It's kind of like Patriot Mobile, but this is Catholic. Mm-hmm. And in fact, he set me up. So I don't have the phone with me at the moment, but we set it up just this past few days, and my wife's using it right now, and it's great. It's great service, and he's got a lot of great vision for what he hopes to offer, not just sell internet, data, texting, mobile phone service, but then coupling it with the Catholic faith, partnering with organizations like ours, the Station of the Cross, and others. And so we're going to roll that sponsorship out, I think, next week. We're going to be pitching it this weekend. And so super excited about that. iCatholic Mobile, so be on the lookout for that. So, it's tough.
I have real questions about the smaller ones. Like I have a generically Christian company that pitches cell phones with me, and I have very real questions about if I can use that in my area.
Okay,
like,
what's the best service?
On my way home from Mass, I have problems with sometimes, and I'm on one of the corporate ones.
Which corporate one are you on?
The smaller ones on your.
Which corporate one are you? Which corporate one? Because I'm on Verizon. On my iPhone,
I'm on T-Mobile right now, and I don't like it at all.
Verizon's horrible, evil, man.
I can't talk about it.
I have such a struggle with Verizon. The good news
when
is
I moved to Oklahoma,
iCatholic Mobile's using AT&T.
I was on Verizon when I moved to Oklahoma, and one of the most well-traveled state highways in my state, Verizon didn't work on for a good portion of it, so I had to switch off of it.
Yeah.
So, and this is my problem. This is what I would love to switch to. Charity Mobile or who are my sponsor, or even a Catholic company.
I'm going to hook you up with. I'm going to hook you up with
deep rural. Like I live in an island, built up island in a deep rural part of my state.
Yeah. So well, if AT&T works where you are, then iCatholic Mobile's your bet. So I'm gonna connect. I'm gonna connect you to him, and you guys can talk about it. But it would be a wonderful opportunity, I think, for both of you. And I gotta say, when I traveled up through Arkansas and down through Oklahoma for my 50th morning birthday, half the time my phone never worked because it was on Verizon. Like just huge pockets of the forest in Arkansas, just zero service. I had to drive to a state park, get on their Wi-Fi just so I can navigate and get the map navigation to make it through the Ouachitas, up to the Boston Mountains and around. And the same thing coming down through Oklahoma. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, what would I do? I'd be stuck out here. Wouldn't be able to, figure anything out. So I just don't like
Right,
Verizon.
so we went to – right, and I'm on one of the corporate ones, remember. We went to this last weekend, we decided to hop in the car and drive to the Buc-ee's in Missouri, Springfield, Missouri. And the maps worked fine the entire road until we got to Springfield to stop somewhere for lunch. Yeah. And then suddenly the Google Maps decided that we were still in Tulsa.
That's right.
While I'm trying to drive and navigate around Springfield.
Good times. Thanks for the vote.
Thanks, Google.
Yeah. Hey,
I had to turn off my phone, restart it, and then wait 15 minutes, and it finally started working.
Oh, man. Hey, Jane, good morning to you. Good says, how much does Starlink cost? Too much. Starlink is terribly expensive. While traveling in Canada
and I've
last year.
confirmed that it doesn't work too well in rural areas for this kind of thing, for YouTubing.
Yeah. It has its downside.
Use Starlink.
And it's huge money, actually. Not inexpensive.
Yeah. To make it work for broadcasting, you need to – there's a YouTuber named The Quartering who lives in Missouri, rural Missouri, and he had to spend thousands of dollars to make it work.
Yeah.
Live stream.
Yeah.
Lucky for him, he's got almost 1 million subscribers. So
you'd need it. You would need it for that, yeah. By the way, Junior Barra, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Mimi, good morning to you. Patty, good morning. Thanks for hanging out with us over on the Facebooks. Don Franco, I see you there. The idolatry that is YouTube. Yeah, YouTube has got its YouTube. There's a Tim Hawkins song that makes fun of YouTube. It's kind of hilarious, actually. But he's on YouTube too. He makes a lot of money on YouTube. It's a love-hate relationship, right? We have a love-hate relationship with YouTube. It has its upsides. It has clear, consistent. Well, I should say that with scare quotes. Clear, consistent rules. Most of the time, not always, but most of the time.
If you violate them, they don't tell you what you violated. Though.
Yeah, that's the rub, isn't it? Like you have violated
my live stream.
Never will they
half
show
of my
us.
Live streams get demonetized because of the word in the title.
Yeah,
I have to go look at it and go, what in my most paranoid imagination would make this in this title is wrong? Like this morning, I'd take the word allegedly out of my title or alleged out of my title.
That's fun.
Well, yeah, I don't know why that is. I can do that in a pre-recorded video just fine, but in live streams, I don't know why.
Yeah, it is weird, but it's still light years better than Rumble. It's still light years better than BitChute. Odyssey. Did you guys even know?
How to live stream on,
I'm on Odyssey.
I haven't figured out how to live stream on Rumble.
I haven't. I put all the content is on Odyssey. If you ever want a back catalog of content that's never going to be deleted, go to Odyssey. Look for Joe McClain. You'll find the content there. Nobody's there.
Do you get double-digit views on Odyssey yet?
Double, yes, I get double, but not much. Like we're talking.
The reason
20.
I ask is because there's like literally nobody on Odyssey. It seems
that's my
except
point.
People who post their videos.
That's my point. And it's just that's the problem with. Well, if I had George Soros kind of money, if I built a video hosting platform, it would need to be as sophisticated on the back end as YouTube is to really truly be a competitor. You have to have the kind of sophistication in the infrastructure that YouTube has put in. Rumble is not there.
And you have to have ease of use. You have to have ease of use. I cannot live stream on Rumble because I can't figure out how to do it.
Jay can help you.
There are weird link a video that's already there or something to play. I don't know what you're talking about. You don't have any way of. You don't have a basic outline on how to accomplish this. So whatever.
It's the most annoying thing.
The placeholder video is very annoying, but basically we just made a little loop that advertised our other shows and things like that. So, and it's like 30 seconds long or whatever with a little looping music track, and it just loops. It is annoying though. It's all these hoops that YouTube doesn't have. And Rumble crashes all the time. But then Rumble crashes all the time. YouTube does too occasionally.
It does.
They're both not as stable as they should be.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, Petra, good morning to you. Kilroy Jones, good morning to you. Phoebe, good morning to you. Miriam, good morning to you. Praise be to God. Christine, good morning to you. Sharon, looking forward to seeing you and your husband soon. Mary G, Divine Intervention, Ontario, good morning to you. Shaquille, good morning. Praise be to God. Jay is here. Jay is here. I can tell because of all the caps lock. Good morning to you, Jay. Glad you're on the team. Semper Fi, brother. Let's see here. Improximus, Helen Grace, Deborah, good morning to you. Evelyn, good morning to you. Glad you guys are hanging out with us this morning. Alexandria Hall, good morning to you. Mac Thompson, praise be to God. Frank Rangel, William Jones, good morning to you. I have to lean in because I'm so blind and old. It's terrible. Scrolling. I missed one. I don't like missing any. Apparently, we triggered Jay with Rob Zombie. Are you a fan favorite of Rob Zombie? Really? I don't think I liked Rob Zombie even when I was a pagan heathen. I don't think I was a big fan of all that. Even back, it's like the whole Marilyn Manson, Rob Zombie thing. Too trying to be demonic, really. It's all cosplay. I thought it was all cosplay, although I've learned since that Marilyn Manson is not cosplay. That dude is diabolically twisted.
That guy has got issues.
Big time.
Most of these guys, like Alice Cooper has said, even after he became a Christian, he said, "Oh yeah, the shock rock thing that I did was all it was vaudeville."
Yeah, exactly.
He said to the point where he actually had like retired vaudeville actors who were famous showing up to his concerts, sitting there right in front of the mosh pit and just kind of laughing because they're like, "Oh yeah."
Yeah.
40 years later, this is the same thing.
But man, I don't know how old you are, but like I'm old enough to remember like Twisted Sister and, of course, Kiss. And it was all these.
I mean, Kiss, they were trying to shock people, but all it was like what happened with those guys was too much sex and starting to play with substances. That's what happens with those guys. And it was, I mean, the most authentically like real criticism you can give Gene Simmons was the guy would try to like literally rip off everything he could and monetize every single thing he could. Like he alienated people in his industry. He's notorious for that.
Yeah.
But it's weird because like the lead singer of Twisted Sister is now a conservative in a weird kind of way.
In a weird
so,
way.
I don't know, but I look back at the hair metal stuff from the 80s, and those guys were degenerates. They really were. But their look, if you took the feathered hair and the 80s aesthetic out of it, but the basics of it, that sort of feminized look that those glam bands had, there's nothing rebellious about that now. Like if that style came back today, people go like, "What are you doing? This is not rebellious." Like what, this is normal now. This is the normal world we live in, and they'd be considered selling out if they had like a modern look on that.
I just was having flashbacks to Duran Duran. Man, I was just having flashbacks to Duran Duran music videos from the 80s. Yikes!
You want to hear one that'll blow your mind? Billy Idol now wrestles with Faith.
He had
an album cover where he's wearing a suit. He has an album cover where he's wearing like a jacket with a necktie. It's loosened up like he's just gotten off a long hard day's work.
Oh wow!
Okay, one of the poster children of the 80s, like excess, is like kind of got a borderline straight edge look to him now. And it's just the funniest thing when I saw that.
Man.
Because again, there's nothing rebellious about the schlub look that all the rock stars had in the 80s and then a different version in the 90s into the 2000s. There's nothing rebellious about it. And I kind of wonder if the culture is going through a realignment right now. You're seeing it in the politics away from most of that stuff. And I kind of wonder if people are going to start putting a little extra effort in how they dress. You see the beginning of it with fitness suddenly becoming people, and then people going a little off the deep end when it comes to nutrition and things. Right. Suddenly that's becoming a thing. That's usually a precursor. And it reminds me of, the old Huey Lewis in the News song, "It's Hip to Be Square," which is a commentary on how all the old hippies from the 60s and 70s
stage with Huey Lewis in the News once.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
I was on stage with Huey Lewis in the News back in...
That's great.
I was in high school, and it's great.
Did you learn the power of love?
Dude, remember when Huey Lewis was in Miami Vice? Oh, Miami
Vice.
Yeah.
The funniest is the scene from American Psycho when he's talking about how amazing and brilliant Huey Lewis in the News is. That's such a great clip.
Did you see Huey Lewis's satire with Weird Al?
Yes, where they recreated it with him and Weird. It's brilliant. It's really, really clever.
Because everybody was like, Huey Lewis hates this movie because they used his song because he wouldn't let his song be on the soundtrack. And he's like, no, I just want people to get, if they're going to buy the soundtrack to the movie, I want them to get something more than just songs that are already out there. Exactly. That's why I didn't want it on there.
Oh, man. So many rabbit holes.
He recreated it, and it was Weird Al sitting on the couch.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Al! Yeah, it was great. It was really well done.
By the way, that is not an endorsement of American Psycho under no circumstances.
No.
Do not say.
No, I'm only endorsing the memes.
Has right. There are clips that are basically memes on YouTube that are more or less funny. Okay. But that movie it deserves the title American Psycho. It is.
I mean, that's what it's about. It's about a degenerate guy.
I've never seen it. I never watched it.
Don't bother watching it. The memes are just funny.
Is a commentary on American culture in the same way that RoboCop's excessive violence was a commentary on American culture.
When I get the Spidey sense,
it's really hard to watch that.
When I get the Spidey sense that they're going to be over the top on that kind of thing, I just choose not to watch them. I just don't want to do it. Like I'll give Inglourious Bastards. I never watched that one.
No, not worth it.
Yeah,
Tarantino's the only one who's willing to go. Who's willing to go there anymore, which is weird. I'm not saying it's a good thing to go there, but what happened to Hollywood? My suspicion is that that blockbuster mentality with superhero movies took over all of Hollywood and wrecked the whole thing.
Sure,
that's why you had so many of those movies. Now they don't know what to make.
Yeah,
I mean,
and they can't even make those well
anymore.
Banking
on another superhero movie to save them.
They keep coming down with these woke, revisionist type of content. And it's not paying off for them. It brings nothing but controversy, and it doesn't make as much money as it needs to make. And they refuse because of ideology, they refuse to switch and to, do something that's going to be more lucrative, if nothing else. If not ethical, at least be lucrative to your investors. But they won't do that.
Well, so I do pay attention to a lot of the pop culture stuff going on because it really is the canary in the coal mine for the state of the culture.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, while at Lucasfilm, they're hanging on for dear life to their idiotic ideology.
They are.
Over at Marvel, same company, same parent company, word is that Marvel has internally fired everybody responsible for the destruction of their brand.
Praise be to God.
They fired virtually everybody. We'll see how that plays out. But
yeah,
because it was that those movies were, for what they were doing, mindless movies with real little substance. They were really well made.
I don't mind a good popcorn film. I don't mind a popcorn film that's entertaining. But the turning point for me, the straw that broke the camel's back for me was The Winter Soldier. When that movie came out, it was so obvious, the language, the taking the Lord's name in vain, the cursing. It was so vulgar. It stood out like a sore thumb, and I thought, this is such a waste. Like, this is supposed to be a popcorn film.
See, they've been doing that since the 80s, though. Like, there's eight. I mean, you guys ever go back and watch like the Goonies? Enough. There's filthy music in the filthy language in the Goonies, even, which is a kids movie.
Of course, but for these Marvel, big budget Marvel superhero films that go back the last 20 years, Winter Soldier was a turning point.
I think they were really They were clearly for that movie too, trying to go for like the gritty spy action thing.
Terrible.
Which, like, again,
it was the James Bond effect on
or more like the Jason Bourne. I think it had a very like late stage Jason Bourne kind of vibe to it.
My problem with those movies is that Captain America was Marvel's Superman in terms of what he symbolically stood for. Mm-hmm. And by the time they got to Endgame, I never even saw the last two Avengers movies because I was just so checked out at that point. I was like so burned out on that stuff. They turned him from a symbol of hope and all the things about America that we like to all the things about America today we don't like, basically. And it's sort of like what they did with Superman in the last decade. And it's why I'm hoping that if they're going to reboot Superman, they make him a symbol of all the American ideals that are actually rightly ordered and all the rest of it.
They're going to make
instead
him
of a woke.
He's going to stand for being a refugee because he fled from one planet to another planet. That's what they're going to make him. That's what he's been in the comic books already.
He's sense of saying Jesus, Mary, and Joseph were refugees. That's because they went from one empire to another.
Yeah, that's what they make. That's what they make Superman represent in a lot of the comics now. Is he no longer stands for truth, justice, and the American way. He stands for like being good to refugees and letting them have everything and inviting all of them in. Without exception.
I expect the film studios are probably going to ignore what's going on at those comic book houses because those publishers for those comic books, they're on the verge of bankruptcy. Nobody buys their comic books anymore.
No one buys
keeping them going is people buying the classic ones that they keep reissuing. It's the only thing keeping them going. Some wealthy person who actually has a good mind about business and likes to check their own ideology and leave it at the door will buy those brands eventually and do a hard reset on things. Or at the very least, just issue the classic Batman stuff, because at some point, those companies aren't going to make enough money to keep the doors open anymore. It's as simple as that. It really is. Like this, I've seen some of the panels from some Marvel comics from the last few years, and they are mind-blowingly cringy. Like, just so bad.
There's a Superman movie coming up.
As bad as some of the stuff that you saw at the DNC the last few days.
Yeah, exactly.
Where you're talking like people up there naming their preferred pronouns and stuff. Like, why do I care about somebody in spandex fighting crime in an unbelievable way what their preferred pronouns are?
Well, when you say it like that, I mean, come on. We call that fighting crime in spandex. We call that a Tuesday in New York City. I mean, come on, man. That's just normal behavior these days. Hey, by the way, good morning and welcome, Honey West, and Apak Gabriel is on the team. Good morning to you. I see Sci-Fi says now that the Acolyte failed tremendously, let's see where Star Wars goes. Yeah, we'll see. Tremendously. Use that Donald Trump.
They canceled season 2.
Yeah, I don't blame them.
That's a sign of hope.
But I don't like new Disney canon anyway. It's terrible.
It's horrible.
The old one was terrible too, but it was terrible in a more charming way, kind of like the prequels.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be the biggest Star Wars nerd, and I remember realizing I had a disordered attachment to Star Wars, and I literally prayed that God would help me break my disordered attachment from it. And then The Force Awakens was released, and I walked out of that movie going, well, this is probably their apology showing they know how to make a Star Wars movie, so they decided to make a shot-for-shot practical remake of the original film. And then they released The Last Jedi, and after that, I was just like, well, like I was the biggest Star Wars fan, and I've still never seen The Rise of Palpatine or whatever it's called.
I haven't
Never
either.
seen it.
Same story here. Of course, when I was a kid, we memorized A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. Like we played those as kids. That's what we played. When we played together in the neighborhood, I always had to be Han Solo. I could never be Luke Skywalker. I was so bitter over that. But you know what I mean? Like, so we memorized every line of those films, and I can't bring myself to watch it. It's so bad. Like I could barely tolerate the first of these latest 3 films, and I was like, okay, fine, you reset, okay, great. But the next one, you're going to deliver the goods. There was one job that Star Wars had to deliver on, and that was the Luke Skywalker we've been waiting decades for. It was your one
task.
Thing
you see him do is throw his lightsaber over his shoulder.
Yeah.
First thing you see him do.
Like it was, I mean, so.
Yeah, that's kind of the definition of the modern like approach to, we want to make money. We want to cash in on the name recognition of a classic property, a classic intellectual property. But we also need to make sure that everyone knows that we have the proper anti-establishment, irreverent, liberal attitude to anything established. And it's not like Star Wars wasn't pretty liberal from the get-go. Like, right. George Lucas has been on record saying, "Oh yeah, the rebels were the Viet Cong." Like that's what I was thinking. Like, literally.
You're the best, dude. You're the best.
But like, because it's kind of like Star Trek. Like Star Trek is super liberal, but because it's made by older generations, they're still holding on to some of this sort of like everyone's very professional. Mm-hmm. It's still kind of like a military organization. Right. Like there's still respect for rank and command and that sort of thing. Sure. Same with Star Wars. There's still classic heroic ideals in there, even though there's liberal politics.
That is still that was still consistent.
Like, but the revolution keeps on eating its own.
I like Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, exactly.
I do. I like some Star Trek.
Exactly. There's
but not New Star Trek. New Star Trek is just Maoism in space.
All of the and all of these supposedly professional, fleet officers are acting like 20-something people hanging out at a coffee bar in New York where they're just constantly quipping. It's like it's Marvel quipping syndrome where everyone's just quipping. You can't have a serious emotional moment unless you're being preachy about a hollow, modernist ideal. That's the only time you're allowed to have a serious moment.
My favorite was the body positivity in Star Trek Discovery. Yes. That was my favorite.
It's just it's all
morbidly obese cast member on that show.
Yeah,
it's a military organization, people. And I say that as a guy who needs to lose a bunch of weight. I don't fit in the Star Trek ideal. And I'm smart enough to think that's a good thing.
But that's the thing with the again the kind of the summary of that is Luke Skywalker, coming in and looking like he's going to play the Obi-Wan Kenobi role from A New Hope, like the elder statesman who's going to mentor the young generation, and he tosses his father's lightsaber that stood for so much. He tosses it over his shoulder and doesn't care. That's the symbol of that mentality. And and it's not to take Star Wars as something more than it is, like, and to say, look, Star Wars is like used to represent something great. Like, no, it was always just popcorn stuff with liberal political inspiration. But
an important part of the culture.
It's an important part of the culture, and that summarizes the liberal and revolutionary attitude to everything that goes before you. Everything that went before you is bad and must be trodden underfoot. That's just what it summarizes.
There's a phrase we've all heard recently that perfectly sums up their attitude about it, and it's Hollywood has unburdened us from what has been. It's as simple as that. That's what they've done. That's actually that phrase.
Was that a Kamala Harris quote? Like,
yes. It sounds insane. It sounds nutty when she says it. We all laugh at it, but when you think about what she's saying, it's literally talking about divorcing ourselves from our bad, evil past.
Yeah.
It's just Kamala Harris is basically wants to do to the American government and this country what Kathleen Kennedy did to Star Wars.
Man, we live in such bizarro times. There was no way 6 months ago any of us would have said Kamala Harris would have been the candidate for president.
Vivek Ramaswamy predicted it last fall. He predicted it like a year ago during the Republican primary debate. And everybody laughed at it.
I heard that, but I'm like, okay, come on, bro. Nobody wants Kamala Harris. Okay, so Biden's not going to be the guy. Yeah, I can see that. No problem. Don't got to be a prophet to figure that one out. The guy can't even get past Jello time, So, but Kamala, nobody liked her. Nobody. I don't believe anybody likes her still.
I told this to some friends of mine. I told this to some friends of mine back in the spring when it sounded like they're going to try to get rid of Joe Biden. And I had a theory, and I said, look, you're going to have one of two things play out. They're going to get rid of him, and they're going to put up like an all-star, Democrat all-star, Gretchen Whitmer, somebody like that. Or you're going to get a taking out the garbage candidate. They're like somebody they don't like, that they're going to make look like they're going to try, who they know can't win. And they're going to pair them with either a nobody or they're going to pair them with another take out the garbage person. And they're going to dump the garbage and get ready for the next election. And so what we get Kamala Harris, who there's so much out there about. Like the media, we've seen CNN correcting her now, fact checking her. They've been doing that. And while they're all out there pushing the lie that her yesterday that her convention speech was great, her convention speech to me looked like she was angry doing the Orange Man bad rant.
Yeah.
And no policy ideas.
Still no policy.
No policy ideas and Orange Man bad. Meanwhile, it's come out from the Democrats that the Democrats are not only are they having some fundraising problems after Act Blue got suddenly shut down, basically, they're having a little bit of fundraising problems, but they're also having volunteer problems. Their entire apparatus works based on them being able to go out there and collect mail-in ballots in large numbers. And they're having a hard time getting people to volunteer for that. They did not have this problem in 2020 or even 2016.
They'll still pull it off. You watch.
They're having a hard time with that now. I'm not saying it's a shoo-in for Trump at all. At all.
Yeah. I think the reality
Trump's
is,
biggest enemy is himself.
I think the hard pill to swallow here is we'd be surprised at how many of our fellow neighbors would legitimately want that side of the equation. Right? I think it's maybe I'm so bitter now over the last few elections that I'm just like, you know what? It doesn't surprise me anymore how many Americans actually vote for that kind of nonsense. Do they fudge things? I agree. I do believe they fudge things, but I don't think they have to fudge them so far because the reality is a lot of Americans are just that degenerate and lost.
I almost wonder if Joe Biden is sabotaging her because he went on camera to an interviewer and said that Kamala Harris was his partner in governing, essentially, and that all of his accomplishments were her accomplishments. And that is the last thing you should say at a time when you've got 40-year high inflation and 15 million minimum illegal aliens crossing the border. The two biggest issues in the election. So I almost wonder if he's sabotaging her because, again, Joe Biden has wanted to be president his whole life. And he finally got it, and they took it away from him. I mean, I'd probably be bitter. I'd probably be trying to sabotage people who did that.
If he can remember. If he can remember long enough,
especially if he knows for a fact that Trump is not the orange Austrian painter that they make him out to be, that he's not the monster that they make him out.
The orange, that's funny. It's hilarious. He makes the best paints. I'm telling you, the best pictures for sure. You've never seen pictures like those pictures. These are the biggest, the best, the big.
Believe me.
Yeah, we live in such dystopian times. By the way, I did want to sneak this in while we have time. But Apak Gabriel asked me to ask you what you think. Speaking of crazy 80s musicians, Madonna having her 66th birthday at the ruins of Pompeii in Italy this past week, summing up all the pagan gods. I don't watch Madonna, so I didn't even know that this was a thing. But
that's news to me.
Madonna is so lost. I could see this being true.
The 80s, but I'm trying to be. I do like some of the pop from the 80s, but I try to be very discerning on what I listen to. Right. And so that immediately
rules out
artist
Madonna.
Who called herself Madonna is not making the list of okay things for me as a general rule, especially one who called herself that. And then essentially her entire shtick was blaspheming Our Lady by being impure on stage. Hard pass. So I didn't even know that. And it doesn't surprise me. She had a public meltdown in 2020 and never recovered. Or 2016. And
she strikes
just never
me
recovered.
As somebody who will go to her death screaming. You know what I mean? Even if she were sitting.
I hope not. She was raised Catholic. Well, I hope she repents.
I know, but I guess the point that I'm making is she's hanging on so tightly to this material world and all that she's had in it that even though she's decades past her career, that if she were to face death, she would do so screaming. Unless she repents. Of course, we desire for her to repent. We pray that God will move her heart with some prevenient graces. that will move her heart to make a good and solid confession. And then, praise be to God, she will be in the beatific vision.
I hope that she has the conversion that Ronnie James Dio did. Remember Ronnie James Dio sang Holy Diver, Rainbow in the Dark?
Oh, yeah.
The 80s heavy metal singer. It wasn't glam. He was just sort of like,
Dio. That guy?
Yeah. Remember him? His name. His stage name, Dio. Yes. His real name was Ronald James Padavona. He's Catholic. He's the guy who invented the devil horn sign, which I can tell you what it means because I heard him talk about it once.
Yeah.
He said it was came from some weird syncretistic Catholic pagan thing that his grandma was into. Someone would shoot you the evil eye, so you would make the devil horn sign back at them and it would shoot it back.
You mean the one that James Martin
His explanation, not mine.
The one that Jimmy?
Yeah. And that thing has become, he's the guy who brought that into pop music. Well, he was raised Catholic, and at some point in the 2000s, he got diagnosed with stomach cancer. This is a guy who never drank anything harder than wine in small amounts, never did drugs. He was like Mr. Straight Edge in that world. And he went back to his Catholic faith. He had a priest at his deathbed who heard his confession and gave him the sacraments.
Wow.
That's all I need to know, that people should be praying for the repose of his soul.
Yeah, praise because
and that's what people, maybe we can get one of the high profile priests who organize campaigns to offer a novena of novenas for the conversion of Madonna in a similar way.
Could you imagine?
I mean, she's just living in the material world because she's a material girl, Joe.
She's a material retiree living in a material world. It doesn't really sort of rhyme.
I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Her face has to hurt from all the plastic surgery.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine.
It's a cycle of pain. Pain and hatred of God and hatred of self. Really, it's sad. You got to pray for him. That's one thing that I try to remember to do. I'm not good at remembering it, but I try to. Whenever I listen to any secular artist, I try to think oh, let me say a prayer for them because I enjoy their music. Anything that's especially if it's legitimately just there's not even anything in this music that should be keeping them from being Catholic. So maybe there's hopefully a chance here.
I don't know.
We should also pray for the worst ones even more so. But try and remember anything you enjoy from that. It's let me say a prayer for him.
Let me remind you, a guy whose stage name was Blackie Lawless from a band called Wasp, the band who's on the top list, the Dirt Filthy 15 in the 80s.
Yeah.
The old, what was her name? Tipper Gore. She talked about them. Okay. Mm-hmm. They had songs I won't say the name of. The lead singer went back to his evangelical roots and announced and got made fun of in the metal press that there are certain songs he will never play again live. And his fans were like, yeah, we know you went back to your faith. We kind of saw it coming and we don't care.
See, that's the thing that gets me about some of these, actors, musicians, things like that. There's a particularly famous, we stopped at the Memphis Bass Pro Shop on the way up, and it's a giant pyramid, which, by the way, when I was in the Marine Corps, back in the early 90s, I was stationed in Millington, Tennessee for a bit, and I used to spend a lot of cab money getting down to Beale Street and doing bad things, which I've had to confess several times. But nonetheless, when I was there, this pyramid was there, and they couldn't figure out what to do with it. So Bass Pro Shop comes around many years later and buys it, turns it into a Bass Pro Shop, which is amazing. So we stopped in, we went there, and inside this Bass Pro Shop was a Wahlburger. I don't know if you've ever been to a Wahlburger before. But
I've heard Wahlburgers is not good.
I've never personally eaten a Wahlburger. I can't tell you if it's good or not because I can't.
I'm talking about Mark Wahlberger?
Yeah, no, the Wahlburger family. Oh. Mark is just one of the partners in that business. His brother and his mom are other partners in the business as well. Chain. But I was thinking about Mark Wahlberg, and that's what triggered me to think about the Bass Pro Shop and the Wahlburger. Anyway, okay, I love the fact that Mark has no problem talking about his faith. I love the fact that he'll talk about it in interviews, and he'll talk about going to prayer and going to mass and all that. I have no issue. I think that's amazing. Praise be to God. But how do you make a sequel to Ted exactly? I don't understand that.
I've never seen Ted, but I've heard it's pretty foul.
How do you? I don't get that. It doesn't compute in my mind. I saw 22 Mile once on an airplane ride. And I think it was called 22 Mile. Where he played a CIA agent, had to get a guy to the airport 22 miles away, and it was like a gauntlet, and everybody was trying to attack and kill him, or whatever. And the blasphemies that came out of his mouth. How do you, as an actor, and if you love the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, how can you bring yourself to spew such blasphemies? it wasn't like a historical drama where you were playing a historical character and you're trying to keep it real with the history. You were playing a fake character that didn't need to utter so many blasphemies the whole film, but you did. How do you reconcile that? I don't know. I just, it doesn't seem to click in my mind, right? Like I can give a pass to Saving Private Ryan's vulgarities because there's a historical context there. I can't give that same pass. I can't give that same pass to 22 Mile because it's a completely fake story. It's not necessary. It's totally not necessary to move the plot along.
This is why when Ryan Grant and I and a Catholic film reviewer started this Catholic YouTube channel where we were trying to talk about films and things, but it never really went anywhere because we just couldn't make our schedules work. I would do a review of a movie. I'd go see a movie and I'd open it up with, okay, this movie has blasphemy, yes or no, and how many times did I count it, and this other thing, so that people could know whether or not you go see this movie or not. And the number of movies I saw that didn't have blasphemy, I was surprised by some of the ones that didn't have blasphemy.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, like the Meg movies don't.
Really?
That's Jason Statham versus dinosaur sharks.
I didn't see that coming.
I saw the trailer for that.
Action movie imaginable doesn't have it in it.
Wow.
Just,
hats off to Jason. Yeah.
Maybe it could be that those movies are half Chinese films. They're a Chinese company that works with American
and the
companies to make it.
CCP requires Hollywood
I wonder if the
to
Chinese
edit their
government,
film.
which is for Marxists, are extraordinarily conservative culturally. I kind of wonder if that's why.
Isn't that
they have like decency standards?
Yeah, but we don't.
Yeah.
And Hollywood will cave to that because it's such a big market. They will happily cave to whatever China wants. China's not going to put junk on TikTok in China, but China is certainly happy to put junk on TikTok in America, and the same rule applies for Hollywood in America. Hollywood's like, yeah, we'll give you all the blasphemy we can handle in America, but China, whatever you want, we'll do. It's such bizarre. And again, but if you're Mark Wahlberg, and I believe he's sincere, I believe him when he says that he's madly in love with his faith in the Lord and all of that. I believe what he says when he says that. But I just can't understand how do you reconcile that reality to the choices you make as an actor to spew such I'm talking about not just vulgarity, not just curse language. He's from South Boston for crying out loud. To him, that's like drinking water. Like the F-bomb is just a verb, whereas but it's the blasphemies in particular.
Blasphemy is one of those things there is no excuse for. You can't make a cultural or economic argument for it. I just looked this up. I decided I wanted to see what pornography laws were in China. You want to hear this?
Okay.
Brace yourself. The People's Republic of China, this is according to, I just did a Google search and it gave me this AI response. It says People's Republic of China and the Republic of China, that's Taiwan, have different laws and definitions regarding pornography. In the PRC, that's actually China, the criminal law prohibits the production, distribution, and sale of sexually explicit material. That's more than just what we would call pornography.
Right.
And those who do so may face life imprisonment.
Wow.
The 1997 Penal Code also prohibits depicting such acts except for medical or artistic purposes. So there's your out. But how much do you think the party allows? What kind of loopholes do you think the party allows there?
Well,
however, it's still available online because I think they know it's a good control mechanism, but they don't allow the production of it, or the distribution of it.
Something. Yeah.
They have better laws there
China.
than we do. And yeah.
Bizarre. That's bizarre.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim Bowden, good morning to you. That he brought up Cardinal Supich. Remember, the good cardinal said the opening invocation at the DNC, never once mentioned the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, did mention Pope Francis. Like, wow, that should be telling. And some say that he hid his pectoral cross. Now, that's an interesting point. I wouldn't believe that
it could go two ways. He could have hid it, or it could have just been like.
I see bishops a lot of times. They swing, they get caught in the pocket. They're just not paying attention, right? They're just. I mean, it's possible.
I've also heard
he didn't intend for that.
I got an email from a priest about this who told me that oftentimes bishops will actually purposely tuck it into their suit jacket pocket because they just have never gotten used to wearing it. They've just never figured out the proper way to wear it.
If that's true, shame on them.
And so I can see that might be it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the prayer, if his prayer was reasonably Catholic in the vaguest, lukewarm way, but his pectoral cross was out, I don't think anybody would have commented on it. But instead, he gave a synodal
Yeah,
prayer.
Exactly. It's just one more
ecumenical
thing.
in nature. Didn't mention Jesus at all.
Right.
It just mentioned like the vague God of surprises, basically.
The God of surprises. God is not surprised by anything. He is omniscient. He knows it all. He knows your heart. He knows what you're ducking. He knows you're hiding your pectoral cross. You can't hide from him. Like, there's going to be a reckoning, people. We all have to give an account. I mean, oh, man. Where is George Carlin now when you need him? That's what just Sci-Fi Mike said.
Did anyone ever need George Carlin?
I don't know. He was a fantastic narrator on Thomas the Tank
Oh, yes.
Engine.
That's like the only
He was
good thing he did.
fantastic in that. When I was a kid, I loved him in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. He was hilarious in that.
Oh, yeah, he's got a part of that. That's right.
I saw that awful movie Dogma, and the only thing I will ever tell you is if you ever want to see the perfect depiction of a post-conciliar hippie bishop, go find a clip of him as the bishop in that movie. Watch it. And it's if you saw that guy sitting at the table at one of those synodal meetings, it wouldn't surprise you, right? If that guy became the Cardinal Archbishop of Chicago, it wouldn't surprise you. He nailed it. Unfortunately, the movie is one of the worst insults ever put on film by American establishment Hollywood.
That's
Made by a
terrible.
Catholic filmmaker, by the way.
Of course.
I didn't know if
Why,
you knew
why
that.
wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't it be? Hey, Mateus. Well, good morning from sunny California. Praise be to God. Karen Collins. Glad you're on the team today. Thanks for hanging out with us. Praise be to God. APOC Gabriel says I'm soupage splaining. We've coined a new term, soupage splaining. Yeah. Tell all your trad friends that Joe McClain is soupage splaining. That will create more heat and and animosity towards me on social media. That'd be awesome. That'll get me more views. Hey,
Just what you need.
It's just what I need. It's like Jim Bowden. Good morning to you. Everyone is afraid of Veritas these days. So sad, but true. Yes, we live in very interesting times, and I think we should embrace that. These are the times that we are made for.
Have you seen the trailer for Matt Walsh's new movie?
Bits and pieces. I haven't watched the whole thing, to be honest.
Oh, he did his undercover shtick that's in that movie at the DNC.
I saw
He snuck
that
in.
where he was behind the CNN interviewer of Chuck Schumer.
He showed on his show yesterday. He put footage that he had filmed at the DNC of him talking to a woman who was described herself as a lesbian and an activist and all the rest of it. And he was handing out the cards for his project2025.com website, which you should go to. It's the funniest website you've seen in 20 years.
Oh, man.
It's like it was the most epic troll job ever. And there are ways you control people, I think, ethically as Catholics. And I think that's the way he did it there is one of them. I make no apologies about saying that there are times to ridicule things. I actually got pushback once. This would have been like a year and a half ago. I found an essay by Hilaire Belloc that was basically about mocking people.
Oof.
And it was a defense of it. It was
Really?
a defense on mocking people from a hardline Catholic.
Well,
And people are
I
like,
get
who
in
would Jesus
trouble.
mock? I'm like, well, I can go to the scriptures and point some times out where Jesus said some not very terribly
big time.
dialoguing
Yeah.
and synodal things to people.
He was a hammer to the Pharisees, man, especially the Pharisees, the Sadducees, but the Pharisees in particular. He was a hammer. He had no problems with scorched earth policy against them. But I get in trouble sometimes because I speak a dialect that my wife does not understand. That is called sarcasm, and it messes with her mind. She just every time she hears me use the gift of angels and the tongue of sarcasm, she just doesn't understand it, and it bothers her. She thinks I lack charity sometimes with that, But from what I say, it's from your lips to God's ears, because God knows that sarcasm is the golden tongue, to be sure.
Yeah, sarcasm can be employed very effectively, but it can be too effectively. Like when I was, as a teenager, I watched a bunch of, some British comedies and things. I sort of picked up that very dry delivery of jokes, and so sometimes I'll say something that people like, I hope you're joking. I'm like, yes, I'm joking.
Sometimes many times, especially like if I'm giving talks, on stage or whatever, I will land a sarcastic joke and I notice that people aren't laughing. So it's like, oh man, I bombed that one.
That was a joke.
Yeah.
You're supposed to laugh.
Es ist gut, no?
Listen, German humor is no laughing matter, Joe.
That's true. That's so true. And what's worse for me is the talk I'm giving tomorrow is about a German, so I'm going to get all the names really wrong. It's going to be hilarious. Hey, 105 Northside, good morning to you. Asks a deep and profound question. Why is Taylor Marshall always avoiding the Jewish question? I have no idea.
He's not. Have you been on Twitter?
Taylor doesn't.
On Twitter?
Taylor doesn't take my phone
much.
calls, and he doesn't respond to my text messages. Trust me, I've tried.
I don't find the question even interesting, honestly.
I commented on it Monday,
and I think I'm actually immediately suspicious of people who are very obsessed with that question.
Yeah,
because I'm wondering if behind the screen of the person asking that question is a guy in an FBI jacket.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think maybe 105 Northside might be the location of his listening post.
On social media, people who often lack sense to know what it is they're asking in the environment they're asking. They have literally no situational awareness, or they're getting a paycheck.
It's like people who blame the Freemasons for why they stubbed their toe this morning. You know?
Yeah. Wow.
Sorry, the Stonecutters. I don't want to get our stream taken.
Yeah, I just pointing it out.
Don't worry. You're going to have all sorts of disclaimer boxes. You're probably causing the algorithm to figure out which disclaimer box to put on.
Maybe if we say enough of them, we'll just scramble the algorithm entirely and it won't know what to do.
Or you'll get
overload it like those androids in Star Trek.
Oh, man. Good times. Yeah. I have no idea why Taylor Marshall is or is not commenting on the Jews. I don't. He doesn't take my calls.
Have you
and
been
I
on Twitter?
Yes.
You're on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
You will see he and Kennedy Hall occasionally asking those questions.
Yeah, no doubt.
That's where they're doing it.
Yeah,
for whatever reason, their own reasons. I won't comment one way or the other.
I've interviewed E. Michael Jones on probably 3 or 4 occasions over the last 4 years, maybe. And every time I do, it's just like, you're the Antichrist. I'm like, I don't know. He doesn't say, I mean, what he says isn't that
I find
insane.
E. Michael Jones fascinating. I had a conversation on someone's podcast with him a few years ago, and the one thing I don't understand are why some traditionalists like him so much, because the guy is an outspoken anti-traditionalist.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is fully on team Vatican II implemented incorrectly.
100%.
And that the rest of us are bad and the SSPX are schismatics and the whole 9 yards.
Right.
So I don't understand why traditionalists like him, unless it's because he's willing to go to one place that no one else is seemingly allowed to and has paid a price for it.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. It is very interesting, isn't it? And we're getting ready to wrap up, guys, for the after show, but good to, I don't know. It seems weird being in this studio, to be honest with you. I'm glad to have gotten Dr. Stine back on the team since we were not able to get him on the other day. You were supposed to be on with Hitchborn. Unfortunately, that didn't work. But Hitchborn is going to be filling in for me come next week and the week after, because I'll be back in this spot Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Hitchborn's going to fill in for the rest of next week and the week after, as I'll be taking some days off to travel up to New Hampshire and then back. And I will be in New Hampshire for the High Mass at St. Stanislaus FSSP on September the 1st. If anybody is anywhere near there, we'd love to hang out with you. Come hang out with us there. But I'll tell you more about that next week. And before I make my way back to sunny Texas, where I hope to sell and move to the agrarian life someday. That is definitely on my list. But since I am a sky is falling pessimist, I don't know if I have enough time on the clock before the chastisement comes. What do you say, Dr. Stine? Seconds on the clock. How much time do we have before the great chastisement?
I don't know. I sometimes wonder when you look at Catholic prophecy, there's lots to happen before that happens.
You're one of those. Okay, glass
half full guy. All the invalid consecration attempts by previous popes.
What?
Probably had some kind of
effect. That last one was fantastic. What do you think?
I know. Here's a little hopium for you to go into your weekend.
We got to say goodbye.
Pairs of tomorrow it'll happen.
All right, we'll see you guys right back here Monday morning. God love you and God bless you.